Wir wollen einst ein Reich sehen und ihr müsst euch schon dafür erziehen. Wir wollen, dass dieses Volk einst gehorsam ist und ihr müsst euch in den Gehorsam üben. Wir wollen, dass dieses Volk einst Frieden lieben und aber auch tapfer ist und ihr müsst friedfertig sein.
So, what year did you emigrate from Austria?
In March of 1939. It came under Nazi rule in March of 1938. And that's when Hitler came in and announced that Austria was now part of Germany, and nobody seemed to mind. Everybody said fine, and all of a sudden we became part of Germany.
How did life change after the Nazis took power?
Well, at first the changes weren't very obvious. If you were a teacher, a professor at a school, or a doctor in a hospital, and if you were Jewish, you lost your job right away. The University of Vienna Medical Center, which was the biggest hospital in Austria, 70% of the doctors on that hospital staff were Jewish. As soon as Hitler came in, all 70% lost their jobs, and the country had to look for other doctors to replace these doctors in the hospital, and they finally were able to replace them with doctors who swore allegiance to the Nazis. If you said you were a good Nazi and you believed in Hitler and so forth, that was good enough to get a job at the hospital. Anyway, that's how it started out. And we also heard when Hitler first came in 1938 into Vienna, there was no television in those days, of course, but there was radio. And Hitler gave speeches on the radio, and also a fellow by the name of Hermann Goering, who was the second in command. It was like a vice president. He was second in charge of the Nazis. He gave a speech also on the radio that day, and his speech mainly said he would advise all the Jews to leave Austria as soon as possible. That was his message. So that's what happened early on in March of 1938. By the time school started, back in September, we went back to school. And I went back to the regular school that I had gone to before. I was in the start of the third grade. And the only change that we saw there was that everybody who was not Jewish had to wear this swastika symbol in the lapel of their jacket. We all had a jacket, and so all the jackets have these lapels with these buttonholes, and all of the non-Jewish kids and also the teacher, they all have swastikas sitting in their lapel. So that was one very noticeable change.
So were you you felt isolated from non-Jewish people?
Well, we were once where we had to change schools, and once you had to shop in separate supermarkets. On the day, for example, when the Jews went to the store to buy things, non-Jews weren't in those stores. I feel very happy. I think probably I had as many non-Jewish friends as I had Jewish friends. All of a sudden, I had only half as many friends. Where kids used to hang out in the playgrounds over there, and all of a sudden you'd walk over there to the playgrounds, and half of the kids would disappear when they saw you coming, because they didn't want to have anything to do with you, or else they'd go home and get whipped by their parents, because the parents were afraid that something would happen to them if they would let their kids hang out with the Jewish kids. So everybody was kind of afraid and on edge, and so they did the easiest thing that they could do. Was just not let you hang out with Jewish kids. Then you weren't going to get into any trouble. You also couldn't hang out with Jewish adults. I mean, if a family was very friendly to my mother and to my father before Hitler came in, they weren't our friends any longer, because they wouldn't. The adults wouldn't contact each other also, again, because people were afraid that something bad was going to happen to them, because they already knew what was going on in Germany itself, and they figured that some of the same things were going to happen in Austria once Hitler took over. So people were afraid, and they were upset and sad, because some of the relationships were very good and very strong, and it would be like your next door neighbor who lived next to you that you always talk to, and all of a sudden one day you walk out in front of your house and no one wants to talk to you anymore. They run back in the house and they don't want to see you. So that's because so you were kind of isolated, I guess.
Did you ever experience laws that discriminated against Jews?
There were people, there were Nazis that did come around to the houses and asked about whether the Jewish families were living in some buildings. And the woman who was in charge of our building, anyway, she had known my father ever since he was a small child, because they came around and asked her, are there any Jews living in this building? She said, of course not. We don't have any Jews living in the building. So the Nazis went away and went over to the next building and inquired there. So the woman who told this lie about no Jews being in the building, they would have arrested her if they knew she was a liar.
Do you think Hitler used certain tactics to encourage emigration and for Jewish people to leave the country?
Oh yes, indeed. Kristallnacht as the translation is, the night of broken glass. And all over Germany and all over Austria, on that same night, the Nazis came and they destroyed as many windows of storefronts and any kind of business that Jews were in. They destroyed the windows. They broke into the places. They took stuff out of the stores. They broke the glasses and the synagogues in Vienna, and they really caused all kinds of destruction all in one night. And they killed a few people in the process. Many people were injured. But so much destruction going on in just that one night, and so many Jewish businesses destroyed, and synagogues, broken into, and so forth. That left a very clear message to all of us that we're not going to be safe continuing to live in Vienna. And I think that was the turning point.
Effective in making at least your family want to leave the country?
Well, we didn't want to leave, but after November, we knew that we didn't have a choice, so we made plans to get a ship and definitely make plans to leave. And not only was I born in Vienna, in this building, in this city, my father was born in the same building, and his parents were also from Vienna and had been here for many years. So we had that, I still think of Austria as something, special. Now, my father and some of the adults didn't feel quite the same way. After I got married, I took a trip with my wife to Vienna, and we wanted my father to go with us. We asked him if he would go with us on a trip to Vienna, see if he'd like to go back. But for my father, he had no interest. I guess he felt that, he had nothing in Austria that he wanted to see. He didn't want to be reminded of anything in Austria. And you have to remember, my father actually fought in the World War I with the Austrian army. So he was, he was very, very much an Austrian in heart. But once Hitler came, it just changed everything. But